The detour wasn't supposed to be a big deal. Just roadworks on the M6, signs everywhere redirecting traffic through back roads. I'd been driving for about 4 hours already, heading up to visit my sister in Glasgow. It was meant to be a straightforward trip. Leave after work Friday, arrive by midnight, spend the weekend catching up. I work in IT support, so I'd been staring at screens all week. The drive was supposed to clear my head. The GPS rerouted me onto an A road I'd never heard of, then onto progressively smaller roads. Single carriageway, no streetlights, just hedgerows and the occasional farmhouse set back from the road. My phone signal dropped to 1 bar, then nothing. I wasn't worried at first. I had half a tank of petrol, and the sat-nav still had the route cached. The road would loop back to the motorway eventually, and then the engine temperature light came on. I'm not great with cars. I know you're supposed to check oil and coolant and all that, but I'd been busy. I pulled over at the next lay-by, popped the bonnet, and stared at the engine like that would help. Everything looked fine to me, but the light stayed on. I decided to keep going slowly and look for a petrol station. There had to be one nearby. 20 minutes later, I saw it. A service station. One of those old independent ones, not a chain. Single building, 4 pumps under a canopy, lights on inside. The sign said, "Open 24 hours." Relief washed over me. I pulled in, parked near the air pump, and sat there for a minute. The engine was making a faint, ticking sound as it cooled. I figured I'd top up the coolant, grab a coffee, and call my sister to let her know I'd be late. And the place was empty. No other cars. I walked inside and a bell chimed above the door. The guy behind the counter, mid-50s, thinning hair, checked shirt, glanced up from his phone and nodded. I asked if they sold coolant. He pointed to the back corner without saying anything. I found a bottle, grabbed a Twix and a bottle of water, and paid. He still didn't say much, just scanned the items and told me the total. Fine by me. I wasn't in the mood for small talk either. I went back outside and opened the bonnet. The car park was lit by a single overhead light near the pumps, and beyond that, just darkness. Fields, I assumed. Maybe a road. It was hard to tell. I unscrewed the coolant cap, let it cool a bit, then topped it up. The whole time I had this weird feeling like I was being watched. I kept glancing around, but there was nothing, and just my car and the empty forecourt. Then I saw him. A man standing at the far edge of the car park, just outside the pool of light. He wasn't moving, just standing there, hands at his sides, facing my direction. I couldn't make out his face, but I could see his outline, average height, maybe wearing a jacket. I figured he'd walked over from the road or something. Maybe his car had broken down too. I gave a little wave, the kind of awkward gesture you do when you're not sure if someone's looking at you. He didn't wave back, didn't move at all. I finished with the coolant and closed the bonnet. When I looked up again, he was closer. Not by much, maybe 10 feet, but definitely closer. He was standing near the edge of the canopy now, still just standing. Staring, I think. I couldn't tell for sure because the light was behind him. It's casting his face in shadow. My gut told me something was off, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe he was waiting to use the air pump. Maybe he was just zoning out. People do that. I got back in my car and locked the doors. I tried my phone again. Still no signal. I thought about going back inside and asking the cashier if there was a payphone or if I could use the shop phone to call my sister, but I didn't want to seem weird. Instead, I sat there, scrolling through my offline maps, trying to figure out how far I was from the motorway. When I looked up, the man was standing right next to my car. Not at the window, but close, maybe 3 feet away, on the passenger side. He was staring at the car. I couldn't see his expression. He was wearing a dark jacket, jeans, work boots. His hands were still at his sides. Yet he wasn't doing anything threatening, but every instinct I had was screaming at me to leave. I started the engine. The temperature light stayed off. Thank God. I reversed out of the space, and as I did, he turned his head to follow my movement. Slowly, deliberately. I pulled out onto the road, hands shaking, and drove faster than I should have. I kept checking the rear view mirror, half expecting to see headlights following me, but there was nothing. Just darkness. My heart was pounding. I told myself I'd overreacted. He was probably just some guy. Maybe drunk, maybe homeless, maybe just socially awkward. But I couldn't shake the image of him standing there, moving closer every time I looked away. I drove for another hour before I hit the motorway. My phone signal came back and I called my sister. I didn't tell her what happened, but I just said I'd hit traffic. When I got to her flat, I sat in the car for 10 minutes before going inside, just trying to calm down. I still think about it sometimes. I've driven that route a few times since during the day with a friend in the car, and I've never found that service station again. I've looked on Google Maps, Street View, everything. There's nothing there. Just fields. I know that doesn't make sense. I paid for coolant with my card, so there's a transaction record, but I can't find the place. I don't know who that man was or what he wanted. Maybe nothing. Maybe I imagined how close he got. But I remember the way he moved. Silent, deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. And I remember the feeling I had sitting in my car, knowing that if I'd stayed there any longer, something bad would have happened. Well, I should have called the police. I thought about it sitting there with my engine running, but I talked myself out of it. What would I have said? There's a man standing in a car park? They'd have thought I was insane. But I regret not calling, because I don't think he was just standing there. I think he was waiting. And I don't know if he's still there, waiting for the next person who takes that detour. The gauge was sitting just above empty when I saw the sign for the petrol station. I'd been driving for maybe 6 hours, taking the scenic route through the Highlands on my way back from Aberdeen. I work in IT support and had just finished a 3-day conference. The drive was supposed to clear my head before I got back to Edinburgh and the usual grind. It was one of those old rural stations. Single building, 2 pumps out front, surrounded by empty moorland. The kind of place that probably sees 10 customers a day. It was late afternoon. Still light, but the sun was starting to drop behind the hills. I pulled up to pump 2, the one on the right. There was no one else around. No other cars. Just wind and the faint smell of heather. I got out, stretched my legs, started filling up. The pump was ancient, the kind with the mechanical numbers that flip over. I watched them tick upward while I looked out at the moor. Nothing but grass and a few sheep in the distance. I went inside to pay. The cashier was an older man, maybe late 60s, reading a newspaper. He barely looked up when I came in. I paid cash, grabbed a bottle of water, and a packet of crisps. The whole transaction took maybe 2 minutes. When I came back outside, there was a car at pump 1, a dark blue Volvo, older model, maybe 15 years old. I hadn't heard it pull in. The driver was standing at the pump, filling up. He was facing away from me, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. Average height, short brown hair. Nothing remarkable. I got in my car and pulled away, heading back onto the A road. I didn't think anything of it. Why would I? About 40 minutes later, I needed to stop again. Not for petrol, just to stretch. My back was killing me from all the sitting. There was another petrol station coming up. This one slightly bigger, but still rural. I pulled in, parked near the air pump, got out and walked around a bit. That's when I saw the Volvo, same car, same dark blue paint. It was at one of the pumps, and the same man was standing there, filling up. Same jacket, same posture. He was facing the pump, not looking my way. I stopped walking. My gut did this little flip. It felt strange, but I told myself it was just coincidence. We were both heading the same direction. He probably needed to top up. Maybe he hadn't filled his tank all the way at the last place. People do that. I got back in my car and kept driving. The sun was properly setting now, the sky turning that deep orange that makes everything look a bit unreal. I had maybe another hour and a half before I'd be home. I put on a podcast, tried to focus on that instead of the weird feeling sitting in my chest. 20 miles later, I saw another petrol station. I wasn't planning to stop, but I needed the toilet. Badly. Too much coffee at the conference. So I pulled in. It was smaller than the last one. Just one building, 2 pumps, barely any lighting. The place looked half closed, but the sign said it was open until 8. I parked near the entrance and went inside. The toilet was around the back, down a narrow corridor that smelled like bleach and damp. When I came out, I walked past the window that looked out at the forecourt. The Volvo was there. Same car, same man. He was at pump 2 this time, at the same pump I'd used at the very first station. He was standing completely still, holding the nozzle in the tank, staring straight ahead at nothing. My heart started going. I stood there at the window watching him. He didn't move, didn't look around, just stood there. I thought about going back outside, maybe saying something, asking if he was following me. But that felt insane. What would I even say? And what if I was wrong? What if it really was just coincidence and I came off like a paranoid lunatic? I walked to the counter. Different cashier this time, a younger woman, maybe mid-20s. She was on her phone. "Excuse me," I said. "That car outside, the blue Volvo. Did you see when it pulled in?" She glanced up, looked out the window, shrugged. "Dunno, maybe 5 minutes ago? Why?" "Nothing. I just thought I recognized it." She went back to her phone. I walked outside slowly. The man was still there, still filling up. I got in my car, locked the doors, and sat there. I could see him in my side mirror. He wasn't looking at me, wasn't looking at anything, just standing there. Every instinct told me to leave. Just drive. Don't wait. Don't think about it. So I did. I started the engine and pulled out onto the road, faster than I needed to. I kept checking my mirrors. No headlights behind me, nothing. Just empty road and darkening sky. I thought about calling the police. I actually had my phone in my hand at one point, pulled over into a lay-by to do it. But what would I say? A man filled up his car at the same petrol stations as me. That's not a crime. That's not even suspicious, not really. I'd sound ridiculous. So I put the phone down and kept driving. I didn't stop again. Not once. I drove the last 70 miles straight through, even though my back was screaming and I desperately needed another toilet break. I didn't care. I just wanted to be home. When I finally pulled into my street in Edinburgh, it was fully dark. I sat in the car for a minute, hands shaking, trying to calm down. I felt stupid, paranoid. I'd probably imagined half of it. It was just a guy on the same route, that's all. But I couldn't shake the image of him standing there, completely still, staring at nothing. I got out, locked the car, went inside. I didn't tell anyone about it, not my flatmate, not my girlfriend when she called later. It felt too weird to explain. But here's the thing I keep coming back to, the thing that still bothers me. At that first station, the one where I first saw him, I'd filled up my tank completely. I'd put in 43 pounds worth. I watched the numbers. I know I filled it. So why did he need to stop again 20 minutes later? And again after that? You don't fill up 3 times in an hour unless you're not actually filling up. I still don't know what he was doing. I never saw the car again. I've driven that route twice since then, and I haven't seen it. But I think about it a lot, about the way he stood there, so still, about how he was always at a pump, always filling up, but never seemed to leave before I did. I should have called the police. I know that now. But at the time, I just wanted to get home. I wanted it to be nothing. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I'm still being paranoid, but I don't take that route anymore. The lay-by wasn't even on my map. I'd been driving for about 9 hours coming back from a wedding in Cornwall, and I was exhausted. It was one of those dual carriageways that cuts through the middle of nowhere. Fields on both sides, no towns for miles. The sun had set maybe an hour earlier, and my eyes were starting to burn from staring at the road. I wasn't planning to stop. I'd told myself I'd push through to Bristol, maybe grab a coffee at the services there. But my head was pounding and I kept catching myself drifting toward the center line. So when I saw the lay-by sign, I figured 20 minutes wouldn't hurt. Just a quick rest, maybe close my eyes for a bit. The lay-by was bigger than I expected. Room for maybe 6 or 7 cars, with a rubbish bin at one end and a faded information board about some historical site nearby. There was one other car already parked there, a dark blue hatchback, maybe 30 meters ahead of me. I pulled in near the entrance, left my engine running, and tilted my seat back. I set a timer on my phone for 15 minutes. The radio was playing something quiet, talk radio, I think. I remember looking at the other car in my rear view mirror and thinking it was odd that I couldn't see anyone inside. The windows weren't tinted or anything, it just looked empty. I closed my eyes. When the timer went off, I sat up and checked my mirrors before pulling out. That's when I saw him. A man standing maybe 10 meters behind my car, right at the edge of the lay-by, where the grass started. He was wearing a dark jacket and jeans, hands in his pockets, just standing there facing my car. I didn't think much of it at first. Yet maybe he'd been in the other car, and I just hadn't noticed him get out. Maybe he was stretching his legs or taking a call. I put the car in gear and started to pull forward. Then, I glanced in the mirror again. He was closer, not running, not walking quickly, just closer. Maybe 5 meters behind my car, now still facing me. I stopped. I don't know why. My gut was telling me something was off, but I told myself I was being paranoid. I'd been driving all day, I was tired, maybe I'd misjudged the distance. I looked in the mirror again. He was standing still now, same position, hands still in his pockets. I pulled forward slowly, watching him the whole time. He didn't move. I made it maybe 20 meters down the lay-by, almost to the exit, and I checked again. He was right behind my car, maybe 2 meters from my bumper. And I hadn't seen him move. I hadn't heard anything. But there he was. I hit the accelerator and pulled out onto the dual carriageway without even checking for traffic. My heart was hammering. I told myself it was just a coincidence that he'd been walking the whole time and I'd missed it, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Something about the way he'd been standing. So still, so focused. I drove for maybe 3 minutes, doing 70 in a 60 zone, just wanting to put distance between us. Then I saw another lay-by coming up on the left. I don't know why I looked, but I did. The blue hatchback was parked there. Same car, I'm sure of it. Same dent in the rear bumper, same registration plate. I kept driving. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I thought about calling someone, my sister, maybe, or even the police. But what would I say? A man was standing near my car? A car that looked like another car was parked somewhere else? I'd sound insane. The next lay-by was about 10 minutes later. I didn't plan to look. I was watching the road, trying to focus on the white lines, on getting home. But as I passed, I caught it in my peripheral vision. The hatchback. Same spot, near the entrance, and in my rear view, just for a second, I saw him, standing at the edge of the lay-by, watching me drive past. I should have called the police then, I know that now. But I didn't. I told myself it couldn't be the same person. It didn't make sense. He'd have had to overtake me, get ahead of me, and I'd been going fast. There was no way. But my gut was screaming at me. I didn't stop again. I white-knuckled it all the way to the next services, about 40 minutes up the road. But by the time I pulled in, my whole body was tense. I parked under the brightest light I could find, right near the entrance, and I sat there for a long time just breathing. I checked every mirror, every angle. No blue hatchback, no man in a dark jacket, just families and lorry drivers and people getting petrol. I went inside, bought a coffee I didn't drink, and used the toilet. When I came back out, I stood by my car for a minute, scanning the car park. Nothing. I got back on the road. I didn't see the hatchback again. I didn't see him again. But about 20 minutes from home, I passed another lay-by. I don't know why I looked. I shouldn't have. But I did. It was empty. Just tarmac and a rubbish bin and the dark fields beyond. But in my rear view mirror, just for a second, I thought I saw someone standing there, right at the edge. Watching. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I drove straight home, parked in my driveway, and locked every door. I still don't know who he was. I've driven that route a dozen times since, and I've never seen the blue hatchback again. I've never seen him again. But I think about it a lot. About how he kept appearing. About how he moved without moving. About the way he just stood there, hands in his pockets, watching me. I don't pull over on dual carriageways anymore. I don't care how tired I am. I'd rather risk falling asleep at the wheel than stop at another lay-by in the middle of nowhere. Because part of me thinks he's still out there. Still standing at the edge of some lay-by, waiting for someone else to pull over. Still watching.